Thank you so much for having me. I see a lot of very familiar names, so I am happy to see you all. Those of you that don't know me, I started Florida Virtual Bookkeeper in 2016. Before then, I had been a corporate bookkeeper, so I was really good at the technical stuff, knew nothing about pricing. I didn't need to. When I decided to become a freelance bookkeeper in 2010, I had two clients. One tax accountant that kept me busy by giving me cleanup work and catch up projects. So they told me how much they would pay me, and I would say, okay. So once again, I had no need to price. And the other one was a small nonprofit where I did it mostly out of the kindness of my heart. So I wasn't in it for the money, and I was really charging them pennies. When I officially hung my shingle in 2016, that's when I realized I really do not know how to be a bookkeeping business owner. So I thought I would just do what my previous tax accountant that I collaborated with did, charge by the hour. But because I was a new business owner, marketing is not really my thing. I used to say that sales was my Achilles heel, no, the past tense. I started to undercharge myself from the very beginning. And I did everything that Mark says you should not do. I did when I started. So I used to advertise on Craigslist, offering to price match. Can you believe that? In my website, I used to use keywords like affordable and cheap, thinking that that will get me SEO and make me competitive. But what I really did is that I had very slow growth for those first few years. And the clients that I was getting were not quality clients. I was making money, but I was also stressed out because I was not making enough money. And it reached a point where I felt like I wasn't being paid enough to make it worth my time to get out of bed and open a file. So something had to change. And that is when I decided to seek out and see, what are other people doing? There's got to be a better way. So I first came across Mark at around 2017. I started to subscribe to his email newsletter. I used to attend his free monthly webinars. I will catch his YouTube videos. And I started to get a pretty good idea that value pricing was the way to go. However, at that time, I had an unhealthy relationship with money. I had a poverty mindset I needed to overcome. So I wasn't really ready to take the leap and fully dive in. However, it did give me the motivation to make some changes. One of the things that I did is I transitioned into flat rate pricing. So while I wasn't value pricing right away, for those of you that have been doing this a while, and if you're new, you're gonna learn, value pricing is a journey. You're not gonna just decide one day, I am going to value price, take the stuff, implement it, and call it a day. It's a process that you need to internalize. And as you use it, you tweak it. In my opinion, it's never done. I have been implementing Mark's teachings for years, and it gets better every day, but there's always new things to learn, things to tweak and improve. So at least I made that transition to menu pricing, which helped, but it still was a shortcoming because I was leaving so much money on the table. Yes, I created packages, but I was not creating them correctly. And then I was putting my prices on the website, which I've learned since is a big no-no. So then people had that anchor in their mind. By the time they contacted me, they had this expectation of what their price should be, which then made it harder for me to try to justify charging them a different rate. So while I did a lot and I got to implement a lot of things from the free materials, it wasn't until 2019 when Mark released the How to Price Bookkeeping course that things really changed in my business very quickly. I bought the course, and because still at that time, my business was very small, so it was a big investment, I made the commitment that if I am spending this much money on something, I've got to get my money back. So I carved the time out. That first session, it was live 90-minute sessions, so I booked it in my calendar. so I could attend live, because I knew that if I didn't catch it live, it's easy to procrastinate in catching up with the recording. And I was taking notes, but I didn't stop at taking notes. I then made it a point to implement something. There was so much information, it was not realistic to run a business and implement everything immediately. But at least I will make one big change in my business from each session. I am happy to report that before I finished taking the course, the changes that I made paid for the course. So that was my big wow moment of, we're up to something here. This is what I should have been doing all along. And that gave me the motivation to keep making the changes. Now, I do recommend very strongly, if you haven't yet, log on to the Academy and access the How to Price Bookkeeper course, because there is a lot of very valuable information. Those materials are really worth their weight in gold. I will tell you as I go along which are the parts that make the biggest impact in my business, but what I recommend is go through everything. Everything is valuable. I'll just tell you the things that really were like the wow change makers for me. So by then, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on value pricing. However, I still felt like a lot of things I was just guessing as I went along. At least my rates were higher. I no longer had any resentment about getting out of bed to open a file, because I was compensated on a much better level than I was. But I knew that I had not reached the ceiling of what I could do. I knew that I could get more and that I could attract better clients. So when Mark announced the Bookkeeper's Price Academy last year, I was all shut up and take my money. As soon as I heard about it, I dropped what I was doing, ran to get my wallet, enter my payment information, because I knew this is what I needed. Before then, I was aware of the Value Pricing Academy, but it just felt like too much. There was too much information. I wasn't ready for all that information. So the VPA was a really nice transition for me. I saw it as my value pricing kindergarten until I was ready to graduate to Value Pricing Academy this year. So I hope that most of you will relate, at least with parts of my story, because you may have been there before, you may be there now. If there is one piece of advice that I can give you is, do not make the mistakes that I made, where I would listen to a webinar and Mark would say, do this. And I will have a little bit of a rebellious response of, yeah, it sounds nice, but I won't. Because really, I wasted a lot of time not implementing critical steps that would have gotten me further along my journey faster. So definitely check out the course. I will share very shortly what I am using, how I am using it with my clients, and how I have come up with my packages and price bookkeeping. But before I show you that, I need to explain how is it that I got an idea on how to create those packages. So if there's any parts of the course that I recommend that you check out in the Academy, one of them is the regression analysis. This is actually homework, and I fought it at first. And the first time that I did it, I will admit it, I cheated and I did not finish it. And I paid for that. So watch the video. Mark explains what this means and what it does, and you have a downloadable resource so that you can do it. This regression analysis is where I created a list of all of my clients, how much I charge them, the services that I offer, and I got to plot them in a line to see how they're falling price-wise. The first thing that I saw right off the bat was the older the client, the worse my pricing was. So the good news is I had been improving as I went along. I just hadn't fixed the mistakes from the past. But repricing existing clients is a topic for a different day. But what this regression analysis helped me to do is to come up with the meaningful scope factors for my business. Because when you're going through the training, one of the things that you need to be aware of in order to build your bookkeeping packages, to know what scope questions to ask, to build your price, is to have some scope factors. You will normally have a primary scope factor and then secondary ones. And this will be different for each business. For some people, it may be number of bank accounts. A very popular one that I hear is amount of transactions. So that's what I started. I started with my primary scope factor being number of transactions. But I quickly learned that not every transaction is the same. I may have a business with 100 transactions that I can do very quickly because they're all reoccurring, they're all pre-configured rules. There's hardly anything I need to do. And then I could have another business with 25 transactions. But if each of those transactions are complex, there may be job costing, class allocation, or some other complexity to it that meant it could not be automated and it will take me a long time. So think in your business and with the clients that you work, what do you feel would be the best scope factor for you to determine, at least as a base, to then build your price from? Is it gonna be number of transactions? Is it gonna be number of bank accounts? Is it gonna be the size of the business? How much revenue? Their industry? There is no one size fits all answer. What I've learned in my journey is to do not make my mistake, is do not copy what somebody else is doing. Just because it's working for them does not mean it's perfect for you. Take the samples that are given to you. A lot of the groundwork is already done for you. You just need to download these resources from the academy. And just like when you go to the clothing store and you're trying clothes, you try it on for size. And if it doesn't fit, then you tweak it. It doesn't mean that just because it doesn't fit, you're gonna take it off and discard it. It just needs to be taken in on the side a little, maybe it needs some hemming, but you can get it customized and fitting exactly for what you need to, so that it will work for your business. So I am about to go show you what my brochure looks like, how I present this information to my clients. But before I do that, I like to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, there's one question that's coming up, just one so far, I think. Neil Criddle said, oh, no, there's more. As soon as I say that, questions come in. So Neil said, what areas did you tackle first and or implement when you joined the academy?
That's a really good question. So I first joined the VPA last year, and the way that started was with the How to Price Bookkeeping course. So the very first thing that I do was I retook the course, and it's amazing how, even though I was just watching recordings of things that I had already learned, how many new golden nuggets I got. So the first thing that I did was I downloaded Mark's Trello board, that he gives you the sample packages and it has the cards with the different services that you can offer, and you can then drag and drop them and decide in which package those should be. Because while I had some packages created beforehand, they were very rough around the edges. They were not very detailed, and I had only scratched the surface of what I could offer. I realized that I had left a lot out. So definitely log on to the academy, download that Trello board if you guys haven't yet, because it gives you a really good starting point to come up with your packages. So that is the very first thing that I did. The second thing that I did was I stopped dragging my feet on a brochure. I had known that I needed a brochure, but once again, rebellious personality, I have fought the need for a brochure. So once I joined the academy, I said, this is one of the actions that I am going to take. And I did. And oh my God, it's so worth it. Seriously, if you have been fighting creating a brochure, do it. It makes it so much easier to convey your value to the client. Don't get hung up about, oh, it's not right. My first brochure was garbage, but it still got me results. So I just tweak it and I improve it. And I don't feel like my current brochure is perfect, but it's better than what I started with. So I hope that that answers that question.
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. And it's interesting your comment about your brochure wasn't perfect. Some people might remember, those who've been in the academy for a long time, one of my students early on getting great results was Jane Aylwin, I did an interview with her. She was getting extraordinary results, but she said to me that despite the great result, or she got great results, but her brochure was just a Word document that I gave her. She never got round to designing it. She just used the Word document. And she got amazing results with that. So the message is, don't aim for perfection, just get started. Um, we've got one other question that's come in, but I suspect, Jessica, that you might answer this later anyway. But Lisa did say, what was the best scope factor for you? But of course, if you're going to answer that later, you could perhaps then just tell Lisa to be patient.
Yes, I will get into detail about that when I show how I actually calculate my price. But I will say that my scope factors have evolved throughout time. And it's not so much about the number of transactions, but it's about the type of accounts that the client has. Some clients just have one checking account. Other clients have 15 accounts. But it's not so much about the quantity, it's the type. For example, those of you that work with e-commerce will know if a client has a PayPal account, that's a lot of work. So that is a very important scope factor for me, but I'll get into detail on that further when I do my little show and tell part and show you how I actually have the conversation with the client, what questions I ask them, because those are the questions that build the price. Now, one thing that I will also add before I go further is about the brochure is, yes, whatever you have, even if you just download the template from Mark that he has in the course and just add your branding, it will set you apart. What I didn't realize when I was talking to prospective clients is that most of the time, I'm not the only bookkeeper that they are talking to at the same time. So they're usually coming with this whole comparison mindset, and many times they're comparing on price. But when they have the conversation with me, they realize that I am in a different class than many other bookkeepers that they talk to, because the other bookkeepers don't have a brochure. They don't ask them questions. They don't uncover the pain and reveal the value. The other bookkeepers just said, oh, okay, when do you want me to start? What type of software do you have? How many transactions? Here's your rate. So just by having something, even if it's not perfect, that right there sets the bar higher. The client doesn't know what a fancy brochure should look like. So most of them will just be impressed that you have anything. So don't let that stop you. So now that feels like a really good transition point. If there are no additional questions, I am going to share my screen and show you what my brochure looks like. And can somebody in the chat please let me know that you can see my screen?
It's working for me.
Beautiful, thank you. I'm just getting this out of the way. So because I am a fully virtual firm, I actually do not print my brochures. So instead, what I did is I got a software that makes my PDF brochure looks like physical paper. So then I can, when I am meeting with the client via Zoom, I can turn the page and can start talking to them. So here's what I was talking about just a moment ago about the pain. All of our prospects come to us with some form of pain. It could be that it's tax time and they have no numbers to give to their tax preparer. It could be that they tried to do their own books and they were in over their head and made a mess of it. It could be that they tried to do their own books but got busy and they just can't keep up. So I will normally be asking the prospect in advance to get some information so that I'll know which parts from here I would focus on. I don't read the entire brochure from beginning to end because it will put me to sleep, so it will put them to sleep. I just focus specifically on the parts. So it could be that, hey, you have to do the books. You know, it is hard to do. Or, man, I can really feel that you missed your baby's first steps because you are trying to catch up your QuickBooks. And this is a true story. This was the pain point of a client. When she missed her first child's first steps, that's when she realized something's got to give. So how you structure this will vary depending on who your ideal client is. And you can tweak this and evolve this as you get practice. But in the academy, in the course, you have really good text to get started with. A lot of this text is straight from that sample. All that I did was retweak some wording, cut some of it out. I did make mine shorter. You will know how to adapt yours. Then I can move on to discussing the actual packages. But before I show them the ticks and the check marks, I like to get a better understanding of what type of business owner they are, because each package is kind of customized towards a different avatar. This is a type of person, because not every business owner is the same. Some, they just want to get the tax man off their back. They just want to get their taxes done and not have to worry about it. And they don't care about bells and whistles. So that will normally be better suited to be in my essential package. That could also be a person that either they're very cost conscious and note that I am doing that little quotation marks right there, because it usually just means that they don't value bookkeeping yet until I get to demonstrate why it's valuable to them. So they may start at the essential plan and then they may change to a different plan. And then I got my middle plan, which is the most popular one. It's for the busy business owner that just wants the peace of mind of knowing that the books are up to date, and whenever they need information to make a decision, they'll have that information. But there's also the business owner that they are ambitious. They want to know the details. They want to grow. They need that information. And that is where the Vert Premium plan comes in. So I usually will spend some time trying to get a better understanding of where they're coming from, to have a better idea of what plan they may be more likely to be into. And then I can go into my actual plan. This is actually a condensed version, because if I were to spell out everything, it would be 2 pages and the client will glaze over. So I tell them, when the essential things you need to be compliant, that's when I start listing everything that is tedious, that they don't want to do, but it's important to be done. I tell them, I will post all of your transactions. I'll make sure that they are allocated correctly to the correct accounts. If they do job costing or they have class tracking, I will mention that those things will also be recorded. I will then make sure that your transfers are posted to the correct account. I will reconcile your accounts to make sure that the book balance matches the statement balance, so that you know that nothing is missing, nothing is duplicated. You guys are probably glazing over right now. That's exactly what the prospect does. So I'm usually looking at their camera on Zoom, and when I see their eyes glaze over, I'm like, okay, this is a good time to transition, because I am not trying to put them to sleep. I am trying to get them to understand, whoa, there's a lot more to this bookkeeping thing that I thought. Because I get this a lot when a prospect first contacts me, and many of you probably do, when they say, oh, my books are simple. It shouldn't take long. It should be easy. So by me spelling out what I am doing for them, they realize, oh, it's not that quick. It's not that easy. And then they realize, wow, that is definitely something that I don't want to have to do myself. I want to hear more. So then I can move on to the other items. And I can then, because I already had a fairly decent idea of where they were in their journey and what package they may be more geared to, I can then emphasize different benefits and features depending on what their pain is and what is important to them. So for example, if a person tells me, I want somebody that I can just contact at any time with questions, well, then I will focus on the email support. Now, you could offer unlimited phone support because of the nature of my business. It's something I chose not to offer, but you can structure that however you like. And for those that really want to track specific information, they want to go beyond, am I making money? They want to go into what's making me money? Where am I bleeding money? Then I may go into the custom financial reports or the business review meetings. If they told me I like to get my books turned around quickly, then I may focus on the priority processing. So this is how I am able to convey the highlights of the brochure without going line by line and putting them to sleep with everything. So one of the things that I always emphasize to them is, regardless of what you choose, you will get the clarity and peace of mind. Now, something in here that you will want to make note of, when you're having that conversation with the prospect beforehand and they told you the pain points, listen to the specific words that they use and use them back to them. So if they mention, I can't sleep, then you can say something like, and included in this plan is peaceful sleep. They love that. By the time you say that, most of the time they're going to be like, where do I sign? I do let them know that the way I structure it, I do not have long-term contracts. My clients are free to change their service or cancel at any time. Hardly anybody cancels. Many will upgrade, some may downgrade, but I do keep that flexible. It's up to you to decide if that's something that you're going to offer. And then I very briefly go into the why work with us. Like, what sets me apart from any other bookkeeper that they may be talking to? Well, one of the things that is very important to me, and Mark is very familiar to this, and you're probably familiar with it because Mark shows us this, I am a member of B1G1. So whenever a client joins my firm, I plant a tree in their honor. Whenever I offer a service, I contribute to causes. So I usually don't focus too much in the, oh yes, I went to school for this and I've had this many years of experience, because the average prospect does not care. But they are usually interested when they hear, oh, you mean that I am having a positive impact in the world without having to pay anything extra? And then I just have a little testimonial from one of my clients. This was actually the very first prospect that got to see my very first crappy brochure, but she was very pleased. She's still with me. She's very happy. And she was very willing to give me a testimonial. So as you can see, it does not have to be long or complicated. Once you've figured out what is it you're offering, once you figure out the structure of those packages. So if you haven't yet, once again, I know I've said this before, but it bears repeating, go to the course, watch those videos on creating your packages, download the Trello boards. That will give you a lot of clarity. So before I transition on that, I just wanted to see if there were any other questions.
Yes, quite a few questions, Jessica. There were some questions earlier which I know Sarah's answered, but for the benefit of others, a few people asked the question, what's the software that you use to do that page turning? So do you want to just say a bit about Designer?
Yes, this is the URL right here, Designer. So as you can see, it's spelled kind of oddly. And I actually was able to get this as a lifetime deal. They do have different tiers and a monthly membership, but I just saw a Facebook ad and caught my eye and I signed up for it. And I will give you full disclosure, it's not as easy to set the layout down as Canva would be. But once you get the layout done and you save it, you can generate what's called a 3D flipbook. And you can share this with the client. So I actually have all of my brochures like this. I have my onboarding handbook, my client handbook. So it's designer.page. That may be the login page, but if you Google that, you should be able to find it.
Yeah, Sarah found it. I think it's designer.io.
That sounds right.
She's put it in the chat box. Okay, other questions that we've got here is there's a few questions around specific things on your packages, but actually let's do them in order. Doreen said, are there specific questions or a script of some kind that you use in the discovery call?
I used to have a script, and I found that one of two things happened. I either followed it and felt like I wasn't getting the information that I needed, or I will throw it out of the window and truly get valuable information that will help me relate to the client. So now my script is, tell me about your business, your journey so far, and what made you reach out to me today. And I just shut up and listen. Most people will talk for 5 to 10 minutes. I'll get the whole storyline of their business, including their pain. And if they may only hint at their pain, but I am taking notes, and I will just pick on those keywords. So when they're done, I'm like, oh, thank you so much for sharing that. Tell me more about this. So it's not a script per se, but it's what I found the most effective. And prospects that turn into clients tell me that sometimes what made them choose me over others, even though my rates may be twice what somebody else quoted them, is because they felt I listened and I understood their concerns. So I hope that answers that.
Okay, yep. Let's see who's next. Sarah Kelly said, and this was about your packages. When you limit email support, what does the limited include versus the premium email support option?
Yes. So my essential is 4 emails per month. My standard is 8. Premium is unlimited. Now, I don't get really nitpicky about this. So I don't count any project update emails, or, if they're emailing me just to tell me they uploaded a document to the portal, or they are updating me, say, hey, I opened a new bank account. What do you need? I only count support emails, those things that require me stopping what I am doing to either go into their books to get their answer or research an answer for them.
Okay, great. Jonathan Aldama says, do you share your brochure before your meeting or not until you do the proposal meeting?
It depends on the prospect. Most of the time I share it when I am doing the proposal meeting. I do, when I have the original discovery call with the prospect, I do a diagnostic on every client. This is a paid diagnostic. So I actually may use a different brochure if they told me that their books are a mess, that they don't have books, or their books are up to date. So I do have a separate brochure for rescue projects that I may use first. And then after this diagnostic health check is complete, and we're actually discussing the pricing for monthly bookkeeping, this is the meeting where I would use effective pricing software. That is where I show this brochure. I don't generally share it in advance, with one exception, and that is nonprofit organizations. I do work with some nonprofits, and I will normally meet with the treasurer or the executive director, but the entire board of directors needs to understand what I'm offering and view the proposal to approve. So I will share a link to the brochure so that those board members can view it.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Okay, we have a couple of questions that are pretty much the same from Sybil and Kim Lafayette. Kim said, for the premium plan, manual data entry, how do you explain the features of this, and does it mean you're not using Dext/HubDoc? Let me just read Sybil's as well, because I think they're the same. Sybil says, what do you mean by manual data entry? One of my requirements I include in the bookkeeping is Dext. They need to scan in their bills and receipts.
That is a really good question. And because I'm in the US, our bookkeeping is slightly different in that we do not need source documents for every transaction. But what will happen is that sometimes clients, I've encountered these type of people, and this is why this ended up in my packages. You may not encounter this type of person. They feel like it's a security risk to connect their bank to their accounting software. So if they do not want to have automated bank feeds, then that is the premium feature, in my opinion, because they're actually wanting me to do extra work. And to be quite honest, I don't do any actual manual entry. I just take their statements, I run them through either auto entry or money thumb, which generates a CSV, and I import that. But it's still additional work. So that's why I have that in place. And there may be some cases in which, like, for example, I have one nonprofit that uses a fundraising platform that does not integrate with the accounting software, and they do not want just summary entries made. They want every donation entered. So that is just another example where manual entry may come in.
Okay, thank you. That's Kim's and Sybil's. Sybil's asked another question, which was, how do you present your B1, G1 involvement to your clients on your website?
I can show my website really quick. It's actually linked here. So if I click on that, it's going to open a new tab. And this is actually a page on my website that is linked into the menu. So if you go on about, there is going to be a link for it there. And I start with a brief video where I'm not going to play it here, but if you guys are curious, feel free to check it out. It's my YouTube channel as well. It's a brief video where I talk about that initiative. And then I have the widgets. These are the things that I support whenever somebody comes and does business with me. So when I sign a new bookkeeping client, I plant a tree, and I've signed 42 clients since I started doing this. And here, this is automated from B1, G1. So once I embedded it on my website, as I do my contributions, it automatically updates. I don't need to do anything else.
Wow, that's impressive. I love that. So cool. Okay, the next question is actually not for you, Jessica, but I'll just read it anyway because I think Sarah's answered it. So Mindy said, which session of the brochure's covered? And as Sarah's answered, we usually give out the brochures at the end of the How to 30 sessions, Mindy. But also you will have this one in the How to Price Bookkeeping course. Okay, let's move on to, I think, one more question, and then we can move on. Sybil, another question from Sybil. About how much do you charge for a diagnostic?
I actually have a pricing model for the diagnostic. That's a fairly new thing. Before, I used to have a flat fee, but I realized that this is something that can be value priced as well, because the diagnostic scope will vary depending on the client. I sometimes get startups with no books. There's really not much for me to review. And then I will have prospects that will have 5 years of backlog, and they try to do their books for 5 years. They had never been reconciled. So I tend to start at $125 for a startup that has no books, and it can be as high as $750, depending on what I am reviewing, mainly the type of software. QuickBooks Online is my jam. If they're using something else, I adjust my pricing accordingly, and how the period of the review. All of my packages for review do include a written report, but my premium will get an actual strategy. Like, I'll sit down with them in Zoom and tell them this is where things were wrong, and I am going to train you on how to do them right going forward. So I hope that answers that.
It does, and I'm intrigued by that as well, your pricing model for a diagnostic. Anyway, I think that's it for questions. So yeah, happy for you to move on.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to move to effective pricing, and I am going to show you what is the process that I go through with a prospect to come up with their bookkeeping price. So hopefully I haven't been signed out. We'll find out in just a moment. Oh, good. I did not get inactive. So I have a test client that I use for all of my testing. It's Zorro Test Client. For those of you that don't know, Zorro is Fox in Spanish. So that's why it shows that name. It also puts it at the bottom of the list. And I really have not tapped into the power of keywords very well. So far, the only keyword that I have for this is the year end, but I do plan to extend on that further, but that is not relevant to today's content. So once I get the client basic information created, I then go into the questions. At this stage of the process, I will have already completed a diagnostic health check, so I will know the answer to some of these questions. So what I will usually do is that I will start the model right before our student session, and I will fill in some of the first few questions. So that way, when I am meeting with the client, I am only asking those that I need their input. So by this point, I already know what industry they're in. I do not support all of these industries. I do have a somewhat of a niche, but I learned that if I do not include those industries here, I may come across a scenario where I may want to quote a prospect and I want that factor in. The reason why I ask for the industry is because in this dropdown, in the back end, there is a multiplier that does math automatically for me, so I don't have to think about it. There are some industries that are more complex than others. So e-commerce, it will add a multiplier to my base rate than if it was just a professional service business. So if you serve multiple industries, that is something that you may want to consider doing. They're not all the same. Some have some nuances. In the United States, construction can be quite a bit of work, more than, say, healthcare or real estate. So depending on who you work with, that is something that you may want to consider. So in this scenario, I am going to say that they're a nonprofit, and then I ask them the software. The reason for this is because while I prefer QuickBooks Online and 95% of my clients are on it, I am also Xero certified. I do support Xero, but because I do not know Xero like the back of my hand, it takes me a little bit longer to do books in Xero, especially if I'm doing rescues. So for that, I factor this in. So if they're on Xero, it actually goes up 10%. The software does this automatically in the back end. I set it and forget it. It's beautiful. So keep that in mind if you are supporting multiple software programs and you have preferences. That is something that you can consider. Then I already know their revenue based on the review that I made. And this is one of my scope questions that I use is their payment processing accounts. It used to be a year or two ago, if a client took online payments, they just had one account, QuickBooks Payments or Square, and that's it. What I am finding since last year and the pandemic, they may have PayPal, they may have Stripe, and they may have QuickBooks Payments. And they all have their nuances, and it can be extra work to account for that, especially those like Stripe and Square that deduct their fees before depositing the funds in the bank. So let's just say that this client has two, and then I save and continue. This information here, I also got from the diagnostic review, so I don't have to ask the prospect. When I used to ask the prospect, I never got accurate information. So I will tell you that much. If you're relying on the prospect to tell you how many transactions per month they have, you're not going to get accurate information. Even when asking them about their bank accounts, they will tell me, oh, I just have one account. And I will start doing the books and I see all these transfers and I'm asking them, what are these transfers for? Oh, that's my business savings and that's my money market and that's my, and there's all these other accounts that because they don't use on a frequent basis, they forget that exist. So this is another benefit of having done diagnostic review beforehand, because you know exactly what you're walking into. I do ask how many credit cards they have because they can be slightly different from bank accounts. It can be a little bit more complicated to reconcile depending on the card and the volume. So I do factor the transaction volume, and then I will also see if they're on accrual or cash basis, because that does make a difference. Cash basis books are a lot simpler than having to make accrual adjustments and keeping track of accounts payable and accounts receivable and all of that fun stuff. Now, just to let you guys know, this was based on the model that you get with your effective pricing subscription, but I then added and removed and reworked and recalculated the math. So use that as your foundation. And once again, try it on for size and tweak it as you go along. So I don't remember that the original model asked about loans and license credits. I do, because it's something that I'm going to have to be calculating and posting interest on each month. So it's extra work. It should be separate from the rest of the bookkeeping. And this question here, this was one of those learn from my past mistakes. I had not asked these questions in the past because it wasn't common. But nowadays, I am encountering more and more clients, at least in the US, that use peer-to-peer apps to either collect payments for clients or to pay contractors and vendors. And if you've used Venmo, it's a nightmare. Their reports are horrible. That's extra work. So it's something I like to know and factor in. In the US, unfortunately, checks are very popular still among businesses. And if they're writing checks by hand, it means I will not have that information in the bank feed. It may not be attached in the statement. I may need to log on to the bank, pull up check images, or nag my client to send me their check register. So I want to know that as well, because if they do, the software will calculate accordingly to make sure that I am compensated for that extra work. If they're registered for sales tax, that does play a role as well. And then another thing that I've learned from my journey and tweaking, because what will happen is anytime I use this model and I onboard a new client, I assess now, like, was the model accurate? Did it give me a good picture of what the work is going to look like? And if I felt that something was submitted, I then add it as a new question so that I can ask the next prospect. So one thing that I've added is, how are they invoicing? Because that plays a role on your data entry, especially if they're on accrual. So if they're not doing invoicing, every deposit, you just post to sales, easy peasy. But if they have an e-commerce card, now we're talking integrations and reconciling those disbursal reports. If they are using a third-party app to invoice, it may or may not be connected to the books. So depending on their answer, I will select from the drop-down. Now somebody will ask me, well, what if they do too? What if they send invoices via QuickBooks, but they also have an online card on their website? Then in that scenario, I will select the e-commerce card because that's more work. So that's learn from my mistakes if this is something that you feel you may encounter. Then I want to find out if there are posting payroll journals. If they don't have any payroll, then that's less work for me, less time me investing in their file. But if they do have payroll, that's something that I need to know and consider. And foreign currency. If they are using their credit card for foreign currency purchases, the credit card does the conversion themselves. But I do have some clients that use TransferWise. And that means those are essentially additional bank accounts. And then I have to turn on multi-currency in their books and calculate realized and unrealized gains and losses. So that is something that I do want to know. So if you feel that you're going to deal with a client with that, you may want to include that as one of your questions. And then this is where I bring the client in. And because everybody wants the compliance, but what else would you also like? So I asked them, do you want me to track and report on your outstanding bills? And they'll tell me, oh yeah, that sounds nice, please do. Then, but do you want me to pay the bills on your behalf? Most of the time they'll say, no, I'll take care of paying them. Do you want me to invoice your clients? Oh yes, please, invoicing is time consuming. Now, do you want me to track and report on your outstanding invoices? This is different from just verifying that the AR balance is correct. This means that I am actually letting them know, hey, this person owes you money and they've been past due 2 weeks. So they may say yes or no. And then we go to other things that they might want. In the US, there isn't a requirement to have every receipt attached to the transaction like it is in other countries. So a lot of business owners don't opt for that, but I do offer that option. But I do have some that they already have receipt bank or text. So if I don't have to pay for the subscription, they'll say, yes, but please use my account. Or, oh, yes, I'd like you to do that. Please set me up. So my most recent prospect, they came with the account. So that's what we selected. And then I asked them, do you want me to track income and expenses for each of your divisions, programs, locations? This really applies for nonprofits, but it can also apply for other industries like construction. I have one plumber that they want to track commercial versus residential versus new construction. And this is based on a previous question where it was asking how many locations you have. So it will do the math based on that selection. Job costing. Job costing can be a headache. So if they say yes to that, I'd like to know before I go in. And then I ask them how often they want me to update their books. I do not offer daily bookkeeping, but I do offer other frequencies. And then they can tell me how often they want me to come in and make sure everything is up to date. So let's say this client said twice a month. Now, when I click Save and Continue, it's going to take me to the packages. As you see, these packages are a little bit more descriptive than the ones in the brochures, because it actually tells them the frequency of some things and when the processing will be completed by. Because a mistake I see a lot of bookkeepers doing, and I did it too, is I told everybody your books are going to be done by the 10th of the month. And then those first 10 days of the month were pure stress because I had to do everybody's books at once. Now, for those that value that timeliness, they're also the ones that value my premium package. So once I go and discuss once again and highlight the merits of the package, and I have an idea of which plan they are more aligned into, they say, oh, the standard seems like a good fit, and I select that. Then I click reveal the price, and it will show them the monthly payments. Sometimes they will be like, oh, sounds great. And when they do that, I make a mental note, I need to jack up my rates again. And if they go, oh, that's more than I expected, then I can say, well, no problem. We can customize this. So then we can go back and I say, well, you told me that you wanted me to update your books twice a month. Will you be okay if I only go in monthly? And then they say yes, I can go back, adjust that, save and continue, and then their rate is adjusted accordingly. I do have behavioral rewards configured, but to be quite honest, I don't always use them, because if the prospect seems happy with the prices, why am I going to offer discounts? But if they're still reluctant, then I can ask them, well, do you feel that you can set up view-only logins for all of your accounts for me within 7 days of onboarding? If they say yes, that's going to save me a lot of time, because I'm not going to have to be checking my portal to see if they uploaded their statements, nag them because they forgot, or like what happened earlier today, nag them because they uploaded the wrong month. That is valuable to me, so I reward them for that. Just like I was mentioning earlier about foreign currency, if they're going to keep all of those transactions in a credit card, that's valuable to me. It helps me. And then this is one that I added a month ago, and it's already paying off. Where are you willing to provide a video testimonial after we complete the first month of service? That is very valuable to me, because those testimonials are getting me new clients, so I can then offer those options for them. So then, depending on if they say yes or no, their rate can be adjusted accordingly, and then they got their price. Now, I do have some enhancements configured in effective pricing. I will admit, I don't really push much of these guys, the popular add-ons, because this is something that I would have already covered if I was doing setup or rescue for them. But sometimes the opportunity may come to be able to just add it. So it's there. What I do find very valuable, and this is something that I love about effective pricing, is that I can have premium add-ons available for an extra fee if somebody selected an essential or standard plan. So maybe they don't want all of the bells and whistles of the premium plan, but they do want to get additional reporting. They can select that here. So this is a very valuable feature because it's kind of like, to me, this is the equivalent of you did your shopping and you're at the register, and while you're waiting to check out, you saw a magazine that looks very interesting or this candy that looks delicious, and you just added it to your cart. I don't come in expecting to upsell these items, but sometimes they end up buying services that I at first may have thought they did not want or need. So it looks like the software is thinking here now. So this is a good time to take any questions. I'm sure there's lots.
There's actually not lots at the moment, but now you've said that, they'll all come flooding in. I've got lots of questions because I've been making lots of notes. I'm also just looking at the software and wondering why it's doing that, because I had that the other day with optional extras, and I fixed it because I think I messed my question up, and I just redid the question. It was fine. Anyway,
Maybe I did that.
I'd help with that. Right, so the questions, they are coming in now. Let's see. A few people, so here's a couple of people have said, could we possibly get a copy of Jessica's questions on effective pricing with options per questions to help us modify our module, that was Jonathan's asked that question, and I think somebody else did as well. Philip Sinclair asked if we can get a copy of the scope questions. Is that, I can't speak on your behalf, Jessica, but if you're happy to share the questions that you've got in there, or some screenshots or something.
Yes, I don't feel like this is proprietary or anything like that. It was essentially your base model evolved. So I don't know what would be the easiest way to share it. If there's a way to just share the model, or if not, I could take screenshots.
Well, actually, interesting that you've now this question's come up. We've just been talking to the developers this morning about the next release of the software coming out in September. And one of the features that we will be building in is the ability that if you create a model that you're willing to share with other people, there'll be an option for you to hit the share button, and it comes into our account centrally, and then we can push it out to other people. So there will be, by the end of September, I think, a facility to share models.
Nice.
There's some other reasons why we're going to do that. It's to do with helping clients with their pricing, and I'll talk more about that another time. But in the meantime, just grabbing some screenshots or something, or Sarah could type them up or something, the questions. Okay, let's move on to Shalita has asked a question. She says, regarding your processing completed by frequency, when you say end of the month, 25th of the month and 15th of the month, this is the subsequent month of closing the books, is that correct?
That's right. So right now we're in August. So my clients that chose the essential option, they will have their July close completed by August 31st.
Okay, great. Let me look at the next one. So Melanie Jury says, how do you manage scope creep, I think that is. Scope creep, for instance, you said you would do my invoicing and it turns out into a major nightmare of time tracking, etc., etc.
That's a really good question. And the key to avoid scope creep is you want to have a very detailed scope. So once I finish doing the conversation on pricing with the client and we agree on the price, I send them a formal proposal that they electronically accept. And in there, I spelled out the scope very detailed based on the findings of the diagnostic review. So I will specify this many accounts, this many transactions, these different things. So for invoicing, I would have already seen how they invoice, and I will see their average volume, and I will put a cap, say 40 invoices per month. So if suddenly they double in growth and need 80 invoices per month, I can go back to them and say, hey, congratulations on your growth. We need to, right now we have exceeded the scope of your agreement. This is good news. It means that you're growing. Sign here, I have a change order for adjusting to the new scope of service. But hey, also don't forget, I have these other options if you feel that this is also a good time for you to change other parts of your service. So that's usually what I do for things like that.
Okay, awesome. Mindy's got a question, which I had as a question as well, actually, so that's good. She says, I have issues with picking the numbers and multiplying factors for each question. How do you start with these? I wind up overthinking and get paralyzed. And my question was going to be, how long did you spend playing around, and at what point did you decide, I'm just going to do this in front of a client and see how it goes? And it may be, if you hit the back button, it may be it might be worth drilling into the back end, perhaps. I don't know whether you use the review feature to test different prices and stuff.
Yes.
But yeah, so if you could perhaps talk us through how you thought about the numbers and behind the scenes and the testing side of things.
Absolutely. And yes, there was a journey of trial and error. Like I said, what I first had done, so let me go back, is I had gone to this list of models that are here, and I took the bookkeeping US one and I cloned it. I used it as my baseline, and then I just started to tweak. So that has evolved into the one that you guys just got to see the front end for. This is the back end. So I did at first start using the review, meaning I create the questions, the math, and then I will test it. This is a valuable thing. If you're creating your models, I don't recommend you skip this step, because if you messed up the math, this is where you'll know it. I once made a decimal error and the rate came up very crazy. Another time I made a decimal error and it shrank the rate to a fraction what it should be. So that is where you will catch little quirks like that. So I do mainly relate, because I did also get stuck on analysis paralysis. And that is why I actually have a monitor here, a board with this quote that says, perfection is the enemy of completion. Whenever I get stuck, I look to my right and I go, that is right. Something is better than nothing. So my first few models, they were not very good. And sometimes when I did the math for the client, before I felt truly comfortable, what I would do is I will do the diagnostic review, go through the model myself, kind of assuming based on what we had discussed on what additional services they may or may not want, and see what I got. And sometimes at first, sometimes the numbers will be like, whoa, that's a lot more than if I would have come up with on my own. And that was like the big gift from this program, this effective pricing software, is that once I started to do this with my clients via Zoom, even if I go, whoa, and I see that number and go, yikes, are they going to accept that? It's okay, because the client saw it and they're blaming the computer for doing the math. Because before I used to have this urge of, oh, that seems high, I'm gonna discount it because I don't think they're gonna want that. Using the software with the client prevents me from undercutting myself and leaving money on the table. But I know that wasn't the actual question, so I'm just gonna go back to the questions in here. I do have a base price that the software starts calculating from. And then each question, they have the different formulas for it. So I'm sorry, the industry one, it's a multiply, and here are the values. I've been tweaking those as I go, and I will probably tweak them again. So don't consider this perfect, consider this good enough. It's been getting the job done for me. And if I quote a prospect and I feel like it could be better, as soon as I get out the Zoom call and I send them the proposal, I go into my model and I make the tweaks as we go. So I am very familiar with analysis paralysis, Mindy. Take a deep breath, create a test client if you don't have one yet. And what I found helpful is to use my existing clients as real world case studies. Like, okay, if I was quoting this €5 client for the first time today. What is the rate that I would come up with? And I will give you a really good practice and trial and error to tweak your formulas to help you feel confident in going live with a client at the same time. I hope that answers that.
That's great advice there, Jessica. Absolutely, I agree with that. One thing I was thinking about, if you could just click on expressing price for a second. Yeah, so a point I just wanted to make to everybody who's just one of the things that we always say is make sure that your first question is not a multiplier. And the reason for that is because by default the base price is 0. You normally use the first question to come up with a number, and if base price is 0 and you have a multiplier, then multiplied by 0 just comes up with 0. But so if that light bulb went off if that red flag went off in your mind, what Jessica's doing here is she's actually putting a number in for a base price. So in your case, Jessica, you got $900, and that's why when you start with a fixed number, you can have your first question be a multiplier. So I just thought I'd raise that, Jessica, in case some people get confused, because I often say don't use a multiplier first question, but that's when you can.
No, that is definitely a really valid point, and because I said it so long ago, I forgot about it, but that's when you would, if you go and test your model and you click calculate, if you had a multiplier without a base fee, this will go to 0. And that will be your first clue that things were wonky. So thank you so much, Mark, for that reminder. And when you guys are editing your models, definitely do not skip the review tab.
Yeah, the review's great for checking when things go wrong. And actually, interestingly, a week on Friday, my next session on how to use effective pricing will be all about this topic that we're just talking about right now, how to test, how to use the review section and so on. Anyway, let's move on to some other questions. Sure. I think the next one is... I think it's Sarah Kelly's the next question, if I've got them right. Can you verify when you do the health check or diagnostic? Do you do it between the first meeting, discovery, and the second meeting, pricing?
Yes. So my prospect journey is they'll schedule a discovery call. During that discovery call, I'll uncover the pain, and then I tell them, I think I can help you, but in order to come up with a custom strategy for your needs, I need to do a check of your books so that I know exactly what we're dealing with, what needs to get done, and I can get you an accurate rate so that there are no surprises. Prospects love it when you tell them no surprises because they really dread those. So I then, after the discovery call, they get a proposal for the health check. I've actually started to use a model for that. So we do that in that discovery call very quickly. It's a very short one, nowhere near as long as this. It's pretty quick and easy. They do the diagnostic. And once the diagnostic is completed, with the diagnostic review report, they get a click here to schedule a time to discuss the findings and next steps. In that meeting, that is when we had this conversation and I shared this model with them.
Okay, great. The next question, I don't want to put you on the spot, Jessica, so you don't have to answer this one, but Shalita did say, do you have a diagnostic report you're willing to share? So what I will say is anything that you are willing to share, Jessica, if you just send it to Sarah, we'll upload it with the recording. So it's entirely up to you what you want to share.
Melanie Jury
says, what information do you request for the diagnostic review? Yeah.
I request access to their books, 3 months worth of statements for all business accounts. So all bank accounts, credit cards, Stripe, Square, PayPal, whatever they may have, and their last tax return unless they're a startup.
Okay. Let me do the questions out of order now because there's a lot of interest in your diagnostic review process, it seems. So Janine Hamilton says, could you explain a bit more on how you choose the price for the diagnostic review?
Sure. Well, until very recently, it was a flat fee and it was determined based on the period that I was reviewing. So if I was only reviewing, say, January through now, it would be one rate. If I needed to review last year, it would be a different rate. It was very low. I still think it's very low. However, because I love working with startups, my passion is helping those business owners who the statistics say they have a 50% chance of not making it to 5 years. The prospects that I get are people in pain and broke. So I find that I don't have a need or desire to charge them more to get them in the door, because once they taken my medicine, so to speak, for a few months, they can afford a lot more. So it pays for me down the line. So my diagnostic review starts at 95. If I am just reviewing a few bank statements for somebody that's new, maybe they had a spreadsheet where they were tracking stuff. If they actually have books, it could be anywhere from 150 to 750. Once again, depending on their complexity and how much, those people usually come to me as a rescue. You will have two types of prospects. You'll have somebody that has up-to-date books and they just want to pass them on to somebody new, say their former bookkeepers sacked them or is retiring or whatever. And then most commonly for me are the ones that come in as a rescue project first, and they become a monthly bookkeeping client after that's done. They are the ones whose books are a disaster or they have no books. So that's why I have different rates depending on what I'm dealing with.
Okay, great. We have another question. I don't really understand this question, so forgive me. But Karen Christie says, do you account for different rates for staff or bookkeeping help from ICs? And I don't know what ICs are.
Independent contractors.
Oh, of course. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I do not, because one of the things about value pricing is that it's not about my cost. It's about what the client values. My cost may be here, but in the client size, the value is here. So if I calculate solely based on what it costs me, I'm leaving all this in the table. I'm missing out on all of this revenue. So what I have done is, that's why I have a base price in my model. I won't get out of bed and open this file for anything less than this. And it's never that amount, because the model starts adding based on the additional questions. So by the time everything is said and done, I am getting enough for that project, whether I am doing it or I am paying somebody to do it.
Okay, and I love that. That makes so much sense. I love that answer that you gave about it's not about your cost, it's about the value, which it absolutely is. So I love your thinking, Jessica.
I learned that from you, Mark.
Well, you're a great student. Now, I've got some more questions, so we're not done yet, but I'm conscious we've got 14 minutes left, and there's no more questions coming just yet. So
okay.
If I've got questions, put them in there. I know we've had a few people who've joined the meeting quite late for some reason. Anyway, so you may have questions. You know who you are. So one of my questions was, interesting when you're talking about behaviour awards, and you said that you give a discount if they do a video testimonial in the first 14 days, and you said that's been really successful for you. So my question is, what do you do with those testimonials? I'm curious.
Well, this is a brand spanking new thing that I added maybe like a month ago. So I've only collected 2 testimonials so far. One of them got added to my YouTube channel as an unlisted video that I then add as I am having conversations. Sometimes people will ask for references, and I can say, well, here, this is what Margaret had to say about my services. And I do have a testimonials page in my website, which so far has only been text testimonials. But what I am doing is I have been reconfiguring it. So for those that have video, the reader has the option of reading the highlight or watching the video, I'm actually seeing the person share their excitement about how happy they are with my service.
Wow, that's awesome. So a thought I had while you were saying that and going through it, because it is really powerful to have video-based testimonials, and the fact that you've been doing it just for 1 month and two people have done that is awesome. And so the thought I had was, the only thing is you have it as a behaviour reward, and you also said that you don't tend to offer behaviour rewards very often. And I agree with that. It all makes perfect sense. Just a question that you might want to ponder is, if you've got a behaviour reward where it actually really benefits you, because right now you want to collect video testimonials, just a thought is you could actually take it away from behaviour rewards and make it a question. It could be the final question. Would you be interested in a 10% discount by giving us a video testimonial? And the advantage of doing it that way is then systematically, for the period that you treat it that way rather than a behaviour reward, it means for next month, for example, you could just be asking everybody for video testimonials. We'll probably get loads of them. And then you could move it back to a behaviour reward once you've felt you've got plenty. So I'm just throwing that out as an idea for you, Jessica, and for anybody else who might be thinking, oh, I need more testimonials.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Actually, I feel like I'm not particularly missing out if they don't get the behavior reward, because I do ask for testimonials later on. They just don't get a discount for giving me a testimonial later on. But I will keep that in mind, because I may try that for a period of time. And for anybody else that saw that as a behavior reward, don't feel like this is the only time to ask for a testimonial. Something that I do is, after a client is fully onboarded, they've gotten their first set of reports, we've had the first meeting, when they're writing that way of, wow, this is so exciting, I got all this information and I didn't have to do anything for it, that's when you ask for testimonials. When they're really happy and excited after a meeting with you, that's when they'll be happy to give it to you.
Absolutely. I can see there's some nice comments coming through as well. I don't know if you've been seeing them, Jessica, but if so, Susan said, thank you, Jessica, for your wonderful, informative presentation. Nikki says, great information. Thank you, Jessica. Awesome job. So if anyone else has got any comments, feedbacks, please stick it into the chat box. We will share the chat box with Jessica if she wants to see the comments. I think there's another question, just looking. Yeah, so Melanie Jury asked the question, do you get flack from anyone from when you request money for your diagnostic review? It seems like the diagnostic review bit's grabbing a lot of people's attention.
You know, I used to have that same question when I was first told I should charge for a diagnostic review. It was one of those things where I was doing it for free, and I was trying to get resentful because sometimes I will do all this work for free and the prospect will not convert. So I wasted all of this time. Now, even if they do not turn into a client, I am no longer feeling like I wasted any effort. I got compensated for my time. So the way that I've reframed them, and so I do not get flack, is they are getting a tangible deliverable for it. They're getting a written report. So even if they do not work with me, any other bookkeeper can look and see, oh, these are the things that need to be addressed in this file so that they can have up-to-date and accurate books. So by reframing this from, you are getting a report and insight, rather than I need to charge you to give you a price, you know, I don't get any flag at all.
Awesome. We have 9 minutes left. I don't think there's any other questions at the moment. I've got a couple of questions still, unless there's something else you want to run through, Jessica. It's your show.
Well, I wasn't sure if people were going to be too overloaded if I went into the back end on the model. I'll leave that up to the audience, but I know that there had been a question about how I calculated the rates for the different questions, and I am happy to show and tell if that is of value to people, or if not, we can go to additional questions. And I'm seeing in the chat, please share. So I guess I will.
I think people will find that valuable.
Yes. So like I said, take this as one of many possibilities. You know your business best. Play around with what questions are more relevant to the clients that you work with and the work that you do. And if the math doesn't make sense, change it. Like I say, my models evolve almost every time that I do a proposal. It's very rare that I will do more than 3 prices without changing something in my model. So I'm sure that this time next year, my model will look different again. So I'm just gonna go very quickly. I already showed how in the industry is a multiplier, and I did this based on my experience with these industries, how much I like them, and how complicated I find them to be. So there is some emotion behind this logic. I love nonprofits. I am passionate about giving. So essentially I give them a discount because I started in the corporate world as a nonprofit bookkeeper. I know that industry very well. Now, legal, I personally don't like to work with lawyers. I do not have any legal clients, but I do have it here just in case one that I like ever comes along. But legal industry does have some nuances, so I added a multiplier for that. So you get to decide if you like every industry equally, or you don't feel like, there's much difference between them. You don't need to have these multipliers. It's just something that I found valuable for me, because I know that when I get a construction client, there tends to be a lot more involved than if I'm just doing a professional service business. So that's just one example. Then as I go further, like I had mentioned, because I have my preferred software, I do have a multiplier for that as well. If somebody is already on one of these programs, I never ask them to change. But I do have some startups where they're like, well, I was thinking about signing up for Xero. What do you think? And I said, oh, I would be happy to support you in Xero. If you like it, I'll work it. However, I know QuickBooks Online better, so your rate will be lower if you choose QuickBooks Online. And then they can make that informed decision. So once again, your mileage may vary. Think about the prospects that you deal with, if that is something that is relevant for you. Like I had mentioned earlier, payment processing accounts can be a pain in the rear. So I do ask for that, and I do add based on the number of accounts. So for each different payment processor they have, it's an extra $300. Especially PayPal, that's essentially another bank account to reconcile, and the bank feed never works right. So you may want to even make that higher if you work with businesses that have a really high volume. I don't generally work with e-commerce, so my clients are usually, say, a coach that has a shopping cart where they sell a couple of books and DVDs. But if you're working with somebody that sells on eBay and has lots of transactions via PayPal, you'll probably want to jack this up a number quite a bit. So that's just an example. And if I am going too fast, please let me know, but I am very conscious of time, and I want to make sure I also address any last minute questions. So when it comes to bank accounts and credit accounts, it's once again based on the quantity. So I do include petty cash and clearing accounts because I reconcile those as well. So this is based on how many reconciliations I am doing. There's the value in the front end. I just typing a number. So if I put 2 accounts, then it's going to be 480 that the software calculates, and so on and so forth. So some things may be a percentage of increase, some things may be a multiply, some things may be an add. Play around with it. The beautiful thing about these models is that you have that review tab at the end where you can come up with all the scenarios that you want until the numbers feel right to you. Maybe what I use a multiplier for, you may want to do as an add. Don't feel limited by what I am doing. So for other things that they might want, say it's job costing, I add value to that, but I don't do a whole lot of job costing, but I am toying with the idea of making this a percent increase, because that way, if they have more transactions, it's a percentage increase on that. So there's a perspective of how you can approach this different ways. You know your clients best, you know the work that you're doing best. You just want to make sure that your model is reflecting those things that you have noticed. Think about the work that you're doing right now, and if you're already value pricing or offering fixed rates, do you ever feel that there's something that you wish you had included in your scope? something that you wish you had considered when creating your price, those are the things that you want to add in here. So I know that we are at about 3 minutes left. I am happy to stay a few minutes over, but I want to make sure we address questions as well.
Yeah, we've got, well, let's just, I'm conscious of the time as well, so we've got 2 more questions and we'll leave it at that. So we'll make these the last 2 questions. So Sarah Kelly says, and it's a great question, this one, what's your logic reasoning for using add versus multiply?
That's a very good question. And that is, you can use both ways, but what I feel when I am coming with, say, number of accounts, I want to charge based on the number of accounts. If I do a multiply and the base fee is too low, it may not add up to a whole lot based on the number of accounts. And that's where you can experiment also with the order of your questions. Because in my case, the number of bank accounts is pretty high up in the list. So if I use it as a multiply, it's just gonna multiply the total of this first section. It's not gonna factor anything else below that. So definitely play around and experiment, but that is why I have chosen to do that. For things like, what is your industry? Well, there are some industries that I like working with better than others. So I consider that as a percentage increase. That's multiply and increasing percentage. It's essentially the same math in the back end, just portrayed differently. So if I have a 1.1, that's essentially a 10% increase. So I hope that answers that. Let me know if that wasn't clear.
That was a great answer. A great answer. I think a lot of it's down to judgment and testing, and you can always then change it and over time and with experience. The adding is always easier. Multiplying can potentially get you into trouble if you it can end up being very big numbers. But equally, adding can be quite useful if you know that there is actually a hard cost to you that you do need to cover. Then you can ensure that's covered in that. Whereas multiply, if it's a low base price to start off with, it might not. There's no hard and fast rule. It's a matter of judgment. Let's do one final question. It's a long one, but I hope it's an easy one. Lisa from the UK says she has a construction client who's great supplying information and relatively easy to do. I have another one who needs constant chasing, lots of missing bills, receipts, which doubles the time needed to do the job. So how can you possibly account for that or even know this before they're a client? Any thoughts?
That is a great question. And it can be hard to know in advance going in, but sometimes I know in my case, my biggest lesson has been to listen to my gut. If I get a feeling in our conversations that they're gonna be a pain in the rear, I may factor that in. This is not in my current live model that I am showing it to you, but I have experimented this in one of my other draft models because I am still doing trial and error. I have another monthly bookkeeping model where I have the first section hidden. This means that when I enter those answers before I share the screen with the client, they cannot see those questions. And I have what is called a PITA factor, a pain in their ear factor in there. I've only used it once, but it actually worked. That's just because I knew going in that this person was gonna need additional hand holding. Just based on what I had seen in their books, their previous bookkeeper had left some notes so I could see items in suspense accounts that the bookkeeper had noted client has not provided information. So I knew that I was gonna have to babysit that client. So sometimes you may not know, but if you feel that that's a factor, you can build it in. I know a person that in construction, they have like a form of behavior reward, where it's like, if the person commits to getting all of their receipts into receipt bank by a certain date and writing the job numbers, their rate is less. If they slack off on that, then their rate is this. So you can consider a similar approach when you're doing your model.
Wow, we're just 2 minutes over, but it's worth it because that's been extraordinary, Jessica. You shared so much, some great stuff there. I've learned loads of stuff. I've got loads of notes of all sorts of things I'd never have thought about with scope questions and stuff for bookkeeping. Really, really good. So thank you so much. I know that Sarah's going to follow up with you tomorrow on a couple of things, and we'll send you a copy of the chat box as well, so you can see any of the comments and so on. So thank you, Jessica, for coming along. This is the last session of the week. Our next session will be Online Live Academy is next Thursday, where I talk about the launch process for launching a business club. And then that's Thursday. Friday of next week, we'll be back with an effective pricing Q&A. And to answer the question that came in earlier, yes, I'll be talking about testing. And so we'll pick up on some of the things that we've covered in the last 10, 15 minutes on testing your models. So as always, I will hope you enjoy the rest of the week, enjoy your weekend. I'm going to play out with some music, gives me a chance to read the chat box and so on. And I will hopefully see you at some point online next week. Thank you once again to Jessica. Goodbye.
I wasted all my time, I wasted all my nights, I wasted it on someone who's indifferent. He didn't love me right, he told me I was blind, but I never really wanted to listen.